Hey gang, Mrs. C here with a science experiment. For this experiment, you're gonna need some water, a glass. It works better if it's clear, but it doesn't have to be this large. All the drinking glasses I have are either the fancy ones or they're not clear. You could use a canning jar. If you have some sort of carbonated beverage, Sprite, 7-Up, Mountain Dew works, but when you start getting into colas or orange pop, it's hard to see. This is carbonated water. If you don't do pop or carbonated drinks in your house, you'll use some baking soda and vinegar. Baking soda, vinegar. You know what happens when you mix the two of them together, right? Well, we're gonna put a twist on that experiment today, because the other thing you're going to need is some raisins. Now, I don't have raisins in my house, but I have craisins. So I'm gonna use craisins. You might be able to get away with chocolate chips, but chocolate chips are good on their own. Once you do them in this experiment, they get a little soggy. So try a type of a dried fruit. The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna pour some water into your glass. And I'm gonna take some baking soda. Because I have a large glass, I'm gonna put about a half a tablespoon in. Now it looks kind of cloudy right now, so I'm gonna stir it up, see if I can't get it to be a little clearer. We want that to dissolve in the water as much as we can. There we go. So now the particles of the baking soda have been completely surrounded by the water molecules, and that's what dissolving is. I'm gonna take a couple of my craisins and I'm gonna drop it in. We've already done a sink or float. What do you think, sink or float? Let's find out. Didn't matter which one I put in. If you can't tell, they sank. So here's the twist on that experiment. Let's take this vinegar and pour some vinegar in here. I've got about 1/4 cup. Ooh. So we all know that the vinegar and the baking soda react and it forms bubbles or fizz. Well, what has happened, and I'll bring this closer. What has happened is those bubbles are carbon dioxide, what we breathe out, and they have attached themselves to these craisins. And so now these craisins are moving up and down. So the more carbon dioxide that attaches to these craisins, the more the craisins rise. And when they get to the surface of the water, the carbon dioxide bubbles tend to pop. And then the raisins sink. It has to do with what's called density. Density is a measure of how much of an item is in how much space. So like when you pack to go on a trip, if you cram everything you can in that suitcase, you still have a suitcase the same size, unless it's soft-sided luggage, but it becomes very, very heavy. If you only put a few things in that suitcase, it's very light, but you still have the same amount of space. We know things are heavy like bricks, shoes, pots and pans, even an empty versus a slightly full container. This one's definitely heavier. It has more stuff in it. Same amount of space it takes up. Our experiment is starting to slow down, so let's speed it back up. The cool thing about this is it reminds me of our Bible lesson. And I'll bring this back out so you can see again. Those raisins, when they were just lying on the ground before we put the vinegar in them, they were kind of, not very exciting. But once we added the vinegar to them and the carbon dioxide formed, they started going up and down. Some books call it dancing raisins. But in our Bible lesson, we had Peter. Peter, what was he doing? He was praying and praising God, even though he was in jail. Most of us would think that's kind of a blah situation to be in, right? Be in jail? I wouldn't want to be there. But sometimes God puts us in situations where we really have to think, okay, Lord, I don't understand why I'm here, but I'm trusting you. So I'm going to praise you because you have my best interest at heart. These raisins, craisins in our experiment, are dancing. Peter was praying and praising. Psalm 149, verses 3 and 4 say, praise his name with dancing, accompanied by tambourine and harp. For the Lord delights in his people. He crowns the humble with victory. We don't always understand why God allows certain situations to happen, but we need to trust that he is in control. Just like this whole coronavirus situation. I don't understand it. I don't know how it works, but I'm praying that God would help us navigate through this system, figure out what we can do to encourage other people, how we can get back together. And I'm praising him because he is in control. He's in control of technology when the technology doesn't work. He's in control of the viruses. He's even in control of the leaders. So we need to pray for our leaders that God will give them wisdom. And then we can be like these craisins and praise the Lord. If you would like to have a tasty treat along these same lines, you don't want to drink anything with vinegar or baking soda. So let's start over. Because these are my experiment jars, I'm not going to use those. But I am going to use my mason jar. And I'm going to choose one of these. It doesn't matter which one. If you listen, that causes the fizz. Carbonation is carbon dioxide put in the liquid under pressure. And when you open it up, you release the pressure and that forces the bubbles or the carbon dioxide out. So, I'm just going to put a little bit in there. And I'm going to try these craisins. You have to like craisins though. Sure enough, the carbon dioxide bubbles have attached to the craisins and they've taken flight. I'm going to try something else. Have you ever had frozen grapes? They are a great treat on a hot day. Now the grapes are bigger than the craisins. What do you think? Sink or float? I'm gonna bring that up close so you can see that. The minute I put that in, we had some fizzing, the carbon dioxide bubbles attached, and they went right at it. So you could use these grapes, frozen grapes, as if they were ice cubes in your drink, your carbonated water or soda. And it's pretty cool because the raisins are flat. You don't get that turning that you're getting with these grapes. Check out those grapes. As the carbon dioxide bubbles on top pop, the ones on the bottom come to the surface, causing the grapes to turn around. Kind of a cool, refreshing treat on these hot summer days. But the big thing to remember is always praise the Lord. Praise and pray. They go together hand in hand. Enjoy, guys.